Okay, so we're going to take a look at the cosine function today. So as I'm doing the video, you're going to fill out the Google Doc, only the highlighted parts. So today I'll be able to graph the cosine function and identify key features such as the amplitude, the midline, and phase shift. So go ahead and pause the video and type in the FLT. Just like the sine function, I have this table. We're going to go ahead and crank out all these values. If you're using Desmos, you can type it into Desmos, or you can use your phone calculators. Make sure that your calculators are in radian mode. So cosine of 0 is 1. Cosine of pi divided by 6. It does come out to a long decimal, which is 0.866. And that is because pi over 6 is the same thing as 180 divided by 6, which is 30 degrees. And if you have 30 degrees and you remember your special right triangles, that's 30 and 60, 1, root 3, and 2. If you take cosine of 30, that's adjacent over hypotenuse, which is root 3 over 2. If you type in root 3 over 2, that's the same thing as 0.866. Cosine pi divided by 2, or cosine of 90 degrees, is 0. Cosine of pi divided by 6 is negative 0.866, right? Because 5 times 180 divided by 6, that's 150. That means we're in the second quadrant. Remember, with the second quadrants, cosine is always negative. Cosine of pi is negative 1. Cosine of 7 pi divided by 6 is negative 0.866. Cosine of 3 pi divided by 2 is 0. Cosine 11 pi divided by 6 is positive 0.866. And then cosine of 2 pi is 1. We're going to go ahead and graph this function. So at 0, we have 1. Let's scale this. So this is 1 and this is negative 1. So we have 0, 1. Pi over 6, 0.86 is like right here. Pi over 2 is 0. 5 pi over 6, negative 0.866. Pi negative 1. 7 pi over 6, negative 0.866. 3 pi over 2, comma 0. 11 pi over 6, 0.866. 2 pi is 1. We're going to go ahead and connect this into a smooth curve so that it looks like this. So just like the sine function, it is going to go up and down. It oscillates. And notice that it is a smooth curve. It's not like a V or anything. It's very cylindrical. This really does look like the sine function, because the sine function starts but it goes upwards, right? So it actually looks very similar to cosine, but cosine always starts at 0, 1, and then you can also continue it this way as well. Just like the cosine and sine function, we have all the different letters. All the letters mean the exact same in cosine. The main difference between cosine and sine is just how the graph looks, but it's the same process here. So the amplitude is your letter A. Remember to find the period. It's the same thing. T equals 2 pi over B. Your B value is right in front of your theta. Sometimes you'll see X instead of theta. To find the phase shift, you're going to set B theta minus C equal to 0, and you're going to solve for theta. Your vertical shift, or your midline, is your D value. Okay, so let's go ahead and graph this. Just like in sine, we have the different steps. So you can go ahead and type in these steps. Step 1, you always want to start off with the midline, which is your D value. You're going to create your amplitude sandwich using your A. You're going to look for your phase shift. If it's positive, it's shifted to the right. When you solve for theta and it's negative, that means you have a left phase shift. You're going to look for your period, remember, which is 2 pi over b. And then you're going to go ahead and sketch the cosine curve, and it always starts up top, goes down, and then goes back up. So go ahead and type in all those steps, and let's go ahead and move on to our first example. So our first example is f of x equals 3 cosine of 2x. Right above it, I'm going to write down the general equation of cosine so that you can see it more clearly. Our a value is 3. Our b value is in front of that x, which is 2. There is no c value, so 0. The d value is also 0. To figure out the period, remember it's 2 pi over b. So we found that our b value is 2. 2 pi divided by 2 is pi. So that means that every pi, we're going to go ahead and complete one full cycle. We're going to go ahead and graph the function now. So we'll start off with our midline, which is 0. So that means we're going to start at the x-axis. We're going to create our amplitude sandwich. We're going to go up 3. So that'll be the top of our function, also known as the max. Then we're going to go down 3, which will be the minimum. And remember, cosine always starts up top. There is no phase shift here. So we're going to start up top at 0, 3. And the period is pi. So every pi, it's going to complete one full cycle. So here's pi. So we're going to squeeze this in. It's going to go down, back up, and then at pi, it should start up again. So this gets condensed at 2 pi. Another curve is formed. Another cycle completes at 3 pi. At 4 pi, there's our other cycle. So in this, from 0 to 4 pi, we already have 4 cycles of this cosine graph. That is how you graph this one here. You're going to go ahead and actually graph these on Desmos for me. And let me review how you do that on Desmos, just in case you forgot. And then once you graph it on Desmos, you're going to do a screenshot and then upload it onto your paper, on your Google Docs. So let me go ahead and change it over. So here's your Desmos screen. Remember, we want our x-axis to be in radian mode. So to do that, you're gonna hit the wrench. And right now it's scaled from -10 to 10. Your step, you wanna type in as pi.
I know.
So when you type it in as pi, you can see that my x-axis changes from 0, pi, to pi. To type in the function itself, we're going to type in 3 cosine 2x. And that is exactly how the graph looks. And that is what I showed you there. So it starts at 0, 3, and it completes one full cycle at pi, because the period is pi. There's another cycle at 2 pi, and then at 3 pi. Let's take a look at example number 2. So we have f of x equals 4 cosine of x minus 1. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and find our a, b, c, and d values. We can see our a value is 4. Our b value, there's no number in front of that x, but there's an imaginary 1, so b is 1. There is no c value, so c is 0, because remember c is inside the parentheses. And then the number on the outside gives us our d value, which is -1. To figure out the period, remember period is 2 pi over b. Our b value in this case is 1. 2 pi divided by 1 is 2 pi. So our period is 2 pi. The first thing we're going to do is go ahead and graph the midline, which is at -1. So at -1 on the y-axis, I'm going to go ahead and draw my midline, because d is -1. Then our amplitude is 4. So we're gonna go up 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. That means at y equals 3, we have our maximum. And then from -1, we're gonna go down 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. That means at -5, we are going to have our minimum. Okay. There is no phase shift because bx minus c, we set that equal to 0, and right now our parentheses is just x, so that means there's no phase shift. So that means our function is going to just start at 0, 3, and it's going to complete one full cycle at 2 pi. So it's gonna come down and then back up. It's gonna come down and then back up at 4 pi. And then at 6 pi, it's gonna go ahead and complete another full cycle. You're gonna do the same thing. You're gonna graph it on Desmos and then screenshot and then input that into your Google Docs. The last example we're gonna go over, by the way, go ahead and answer your 2-minute drill. A TV show you're currently watching on Hulu or Netflix. Something that I'm watching on Hulu right now is Big Little Lies. I started binging that like 2 days ago and I'm almost done with it. It's not good. I mean, it is good, but my binging is not good. Okay, example number 3. F of x equals cosine 2x minus pi over 2 minus 3. Right above it, I'm going to write down the general function, a cosine bx minus c plus d. I see that for our a value, there is no number you see in front of the cosine, but there is an imaginary 1, so our amplitude is just 1. Our b value is a number in front of that x, which is 2. And then our c value is pi over 2. And then our d value is -3. To figure out the period, 2 pi divided by b, 2 pi divided by 2. Those 2's cancel out. Our period is just pi. We're going to go ahead and look for a phase shift. To find the phase shift, you set your whole parentheses 2x minus pi over 2 equal to 0, and you want to solve for that x. We're going to go ahead and do the opposite, so plus pi over 2. Those guys cancel out. I'm left with 2x equals pi over 2. I want to divide by 2 to both sides. Remember, if I divide by 2, dividing by 2 is the same thing as multiplying by 1/2. Still getting questions there. So again, dividing by 2 is the same thing as multiplying by 1/2. When you have fractions, you just multiply straight across. So pi times 1 is pi, 2 times 2 is 4. This guy is positive, so that means I have a phase shift to the right. Okay, let's go ahead and start off with our midline now. My midline is at -3, so I'm gonna go ahead and draw my midline. My amplitude is just 1, so I'm gonna go up 1. That is my maximum. And then from the midline, I'm going to go down 1. That there is going to be my minimum. Now, on my x-axis, if this guy is 2 pi, this right here is pi. From 0 to pi, in between that is pi over 2. Remember, I'm starting at pi over 4. Pi over 4 is in between 0 and pi over 2. So instead of starting at 0, -2, I'm going to start a little smidgen over, and that is going to be the start of my function because I had that phase shift. Now at every pi, it's going to complete one full cycle. So it's going to complete a full cycle right here. And I'm just going to go down and then back up. down, back up, down, back up. You only have to give me a couple cycles, and then again, of course, you can always continue on the left hand side. So this week we're going to start focusing on cosine.